Juniper by Monica Furlong, Chapter 25. My mother has had a son, I told Finbar. How on earth do you know that? I saw it, I said, in a kind of dream. The swelling of my leg was gradually going down. The pain had almost ceased. Finbar and I sat opposite each other at Angharad's hearth, with Gamal between us. That will mean that you won't become Regulus, Finbar said carefully. I know. I saw that too. I think now that part of the reason I am a Doran is so that I can protect the baby and the kingdom. Don't you mind? It's unfair that you cannot rule because you are a girl. It is unfair, and I did mind very much, I said truthfully. But something has changed in me. I hesitated, trying to put difficult thoughts into words. It was uni, of course. You see, I had grown up with things, clothes and jewels, fine ponies, cups set with precious stones, delicious food and drink. They were a part of my father's power, a way of showing that he was rich and strong and could defeat his enemies. When I went to uni, she had nothing, not enough food to eat, nor kindling to keep us warm. No possessions really at all. We just used exactly what we needed to keep alive, that and no more. We lived almost as simply as the wild creatures around us. I caught Finbar's eye and remembered the dreadful day when I killed Bora. Part of Uni's power came from her simplicity. In the end, I knew I'd rather have her sort of power than all my father's possessions. So will you end up living like Uni? I laughed. I hope not. My upbringing taught me to take pleasure in many things Uni does not care about. In learning and music, in the taste of food, in keeping warm enough and well-fed enough to not be utterly miserable. But because of Uni, I don't want to live in a palace like my father, with all those precious things and an army. I don't want his sort of power. Not that his sort is wrong, but it is not what I am called to. I want something simpler, where I can work out what being a Doran means. Meanwhile, your brother will rule at Castle Dor, Finbar reminded me. Probably not half as well as I would have done, I said. It annoyed me that my brother's birth automatically excluded me, even though in my heart I wanted something very different from being Regulus. But I will use my power in a different way. There was silence between us, and we both looked at Gamal, wishing that my power might do something more for him. Finbar's patient work with the flute had no effect on Gamal at all. Suddenly I had an idea. The tune, I said. There was a special tune, a rather beautiful lullaby, that Gamal remembered someone singing to him when he was a little boy. I think I know how it went. Not stopping to pick out the notes on the flute, I began to sing Gamal's tune to him slowly as I fumbled to recall it, my eyes fixed on his face. When I finished, not getting it quite right, I sang it again, this time remembering it completely. Now Finbar took up the tune, and the two of us sang it together, pouring into it our love and concern for Gamal. Then I noticed a flicker of interest in Gamal's blank face. It made me exclaim with surprise, but immediately it was gone, and I decided that the next time it happened, if it did happen again, I would ignore it and carry on as if nothing had occurred. Later that day, quite casually, Gamal put up a hand and touched his own hair. Finbar and I pretended not to notice, but nothing more happened. That evening, Gamal was as lost as ever. All the same, Finbar pointed out, it does make you think that someone's in there. The next morning, Gamal coughed in such an ordinary, natural way that we both turned to him, expecting him to speak. As I fed him, I thought I saw, just for an instant, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, though at once he stared in front of him as if it were not safe to acknowledge me. Again and again that day, we sang his childhood song, feeling sure now that something was beginning to change inside him. If he has come out of his hiding place, he needs to pretend he is still there, I thought. We were growing short of food now, and the next morning Finbar offered to go off on a foraging expedition to try to buy meal and do some fishing. It was quiet in the house without him, and it was hard work washing and feeding Gamal all by myself. I busied myself cleaning Angharad's house. It would never do if she came home and found it dirty. And I kept the door bolted most of the time. I was scrubbing the pots one morning a week later when I heard Finbar calling me. "Come and see what I've got, Juniper." I was so delighted that he had returned that I rushed to the door and unbolted it. Even as I swung the door open, it came into my mind that Finbar always called me Ninnock. There, just a short way from the house, stood Marut, holding her leather stick. The two of us stood and looked at each other, accomplished sorcerer and raw Doran. I trembled. How could I fight her experience and her cruelty? Yet I knew too that I carried within me the good inheritance of all Dorans, and that this gave me a special strength. "What do you want?" I asked weakly. "My son," she said. "I want Gamal." "You ghosted him," I said boldly. "You do not deserve to have him." "You are speaking of things you do not understand," she said. "I know you have him here, and I have come to take him home." I was surprised to notice then that although I was frightened of Marut, I was much more frightened that Gamal would be taken by her and destroyed. You know that if a sorcerer steps on a Doran's territory, she is in the power of the other. I have power and I shall use it, I told her, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. For a moment she was transfixed by surprise at my apparent confidence. Then her voice rang out imperiously. "I want my son!" Just then, as the two of us stood and glared at each other, something totally unexpected happened. From inside the house came the sound of Gamal's lullaby, played with the hesitancy of someone who has not played the flute for a long time. Marut was as startled as I was. "What's that?" she said. I had heard the melody many times before, played by Gamal on various instruments and hummed by Finbar and me. Yet it was as if I heard it for the first time and was struck by its extraordinary power. It spoke to me of the simplest and best kind of magic, the magic of human love, the love of the woman who had taught Gamal the song, the love of Finbar and I, who had longed so much to help our friend, the love I had begun to feel for the newborn little baby at Castle Door. Suddenly I saw the pathos of Marut's desperate, scheming life and her unreachable loneliness. She could have enjoyed the love of Gamal, and instead she had nearly destroyed him. To my surprise, I found tears in my eyes when I looked at her. "It was hard for you when your brother took the throne instead of you," I said softly. "But Marut would have none of my pity. And what will you do when your brother takes the throne instead of you?" she asked tauntingly. "You know about that?" If you return Gamal to me, I will help you get your father's throne. If my brother is the rightful king, he shall reign at Castle Dor, I said, and I shall do everything in my power to help him. As for Gamal, he shall choose for himself whether to return with you, since you have forfeited your natural right to care for him. Suddenly Gamal stood in the doorway beside me. I am not your son, he said to Marut, and I shall not return with you. At this, Marut flinched as if he had struck her, but he went on. I have now remembered what I could not bear to remember, that when I was a small child you took me by force from the fair-haired woman who was my mother, and claimed I was your child. She was a Doran and a woman of great goodness, but you destroyed her. You had no child, but you thought you would use me to obtain King Mark's throne. You trained me as a soldier, and you bullied and threatened me to try to make me fit in with your schemes. Later you let the evil knight work his spells on me. You thought it better that he should torment me than that your plans should be frustrated. But now I am free, and I will never come back with you. I am no longer your son. The look of mingled rage and pain on Marut's face was a dreadful sight. She threw her leather stick at me. One moment it was a stick, but the next it had hit the earth and turned into a snake, its head near me, its tongue flicking in and out of its mouth. Gamal and I stood as if turned to stone. I had neither my cloak nor clear water to protect me, though I was wearing Uni's amulet. Now, I knew, was the moment of power, the shift in the balance of things between Marut's magic and the magic of the Dorans. I picked up the snake in my right hand and held it high above my head. The snake is now my snake, I said. It will do as I bid it. If you do not leave at once, without Gamal and without troubling us further, I will order it to follow you wherever you may go, anywhere upon the earth, and to bite you. If you leave now, without spells or tricks, you will go with my blessing. The choice is yours. Marut hesitated, her cold eyes fixed upon mine. Then, unbelievably, she turned and shuffled away. I lowered my arm and let go of the snake, which almost at once became the leather-covered stick I remembered so well from Marut's room at Castle Dor. For a moment I stood trying to take in all that had happened. Then, full of joy, I turned to embrace Gamal. The two of us went back inside Angharad's cottage, and there, how could we believe our eyes? Were Angharad and Uni sitting by the hearth as if they had been there all along. You took your time in dispatching her, said Uni, and you nearly spoiled everything with the flaw in the cloak. But her face shone with pride in me. Angharad got up and hugged me with her old warmth. You did well, she said. The black egg worked, I told Uni gratefully. It saved our lives. I don't know what happened to the Grey Knight, though. Do you think he died? Uni looked rather wickedly smug. Oh, he lived, she replied, but it will be a while before he troubles a Doran again. He has been very ill since the day in the tunnel. That particular bit of magic is very effective, and even now I suspect he is only well enough to take little walks around his garden. Does that mean one day I may meet him again? I asked nervously. If your life happens that way, Uni answered. Meeting with sorcerers is part of your job. What did you imagine? But if and when it happens, you will know what to do. There was a feasting in Angharad's cottage that night. Finbar returned in time to join us, and I think that I have never felt happier in my life. I loved sitting between the two Dorans. I felt so beautifully safe. I looked at Gamal. He was thin and pale, but life had returned to his face and his limbs, and he was again the boy I had ridden with and climbed with so often. Angharad remembered the fair-haired Doran who had been Gamal's mother and answered many questions about her. Uni had visited my mother, had reassured her as to my whereabouts, and had seen the strong baby boy who was born on the night of my delirium. She insisted on looking at the scar on my leg, which bore an odd resemblance to a crescent moon. She touched the scar and murmured a spell over it, explaining that, like the flaw in my cloak, if I was not careful, this could be a place where in the future dangerous magic might enter. "What will happen to me now?" I asked the two Dorans. "You tell us," said Angharad. I considered. "I want to go home first. I must see my brother and my parents. Then, well, they're not really going to need me, are they? I want to travel, to see strange places, to learn more." I was thinking of the need to find the place I had seen in my dream, the house by the inland cliff. I had completely forgotten Marut's plan that I should marry Gamal, but suddenly I wondered what Gamal would do and where he would go now that he had broken with Marut. "I am going to become a musician at last," Gamal said, catching my eye. "There is a monastery at Strenalshauk, far in the north, in Northumbria, where they are famous for their singing and the tunes they compose. I will go there and ask if I can learn from them." Finbar grinned. The quiet life of a monastery would not appeal to him. "I could go back to being a page at your father's court," he said. "But really what I want to do is go to sea. I'd like to become a navigator. I will travel to the coast and persuade a ship's captain to let me join his crew." We lifted our wine cups. "To the mending of that which is broken," said Uni. To which Angharad replied, "And to the finding of that which is lost." As the youngest Doran present, I said, "It shall be so," silently promising to do the work of the Dorans as well as I knew how.